Hey, gang, my name is Carl White. I'm your host here for the next little bit as you listen to the Authors Showcase. It's the Scotsman Guide podcast where we interview the authors of the magazine. And today we are have the pleasure of having here as my co-host here today, Rachael Sokolowski. And she wrote a great article on it. Rachael, this is a really, really hot topic right now. I'd say there's no hotter of a topic in the entire world right now is AI. And the title of your article was The Promise of AI. It's in the July edition on the commercial side of the Scotsman's Guide magazine. So you can go check it out there. So great to see you here, Rachael.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of background of you, Rachael. Where do you work at, and give us a quick who are you to be writing this article today?
Well, that's a good question. I guess maybe I should ask AI that and see what it comes up with. But I've been for the last 20 or so years working primarily in the residential mortgage banking industry in the technology sector. Helping companies, banks and lenders try to sort through their process and digitize it, right? So you've got all this paper in the mortgage process, really, whether it's commercial or residential real estate. And how do you know what's in those documents? You know, how do you pull out certain pieces of data like the loan amount? So I have a consulting company, Magnolia Technologies, and what I provide is consulting services to help with the digitization of mortgages and help lenders get better with their systems, because, you know, as we know in any closing, if it's a residential closing or a commercial closing, we have all this data. It gets put on paper, it gets locked in that paper format, and then we have to do all these things to try to figure out what does that paper say. And there's a lot of what I call stare and compare, where you're looking at documents and you're verifying loan information, you're verifying all kinds of information. And this is where technology, and especially AI, really might help some of these mundane tasks that we have in the lending industry around real estate. And there's some other applications of it that are pretty interesting, I would say, in terms of where can we take this to help people get insights into things, even like a construction project, having remote monitoring and cameras and looking at what the inventory and the deliveries from the vendors for the supplies for the construction site. If we could pull all that together, you could get a better picture instead of actually having to go on site, going through the lists of inventory, matching up what is actually delivered versus what's actually there. So I think there's a lot of different areas where AI can help, but my experience is mostly in documents and how to analyze documents, pull information out of documents, and then make use of that in some kind of analytical way with the use of technology. I started out my career actually in publishing, and the grammar correction system that's in Microsoft Word, I'm responsible for that long ago. So I have this background in documents, structuring documents, and also using natural language processing with technology to try to figure that out. Weirdly, also, I worked in speech recognition for a number of years, and that is trying to determine what's going to be the next word and what does the phrase or the sentence mean. So my background really fits pretty well with AI because, what is AI? It's basically a technology that needs a bunch of data. It needs some natural text, some natural language that it can try to understand, and then it either analyzes it or tries to have a conversation with a human like we're having here today. Very
interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different realms we could go on, and before I hit the record button, I was trying to decide what direction to take this, and to be honest with you, I'm still not quite sure, so I thought we'd just kind of go with the flow of this and see where it goes. So it seems like, I think that the two biggest questions are like how is this going to affect me? How can I use this to make my life easier? And you already mentioned a couple there. And then I think the other main question is, how do you think AI will affect jobs within the commercial mortgage sector? I mean, is it going to create new jobs, or is it going to make existing ones obsolete? Is this like we've seen what Uber's done to the taxi industry? Is this like, do we need to be afraid of this? Like, so let's start with the first one. How do you think it will affect jobs within the commercial mortgage sector, and will it create new roles or make existing ones obsolete, or both?
I think both. In my article, I referenced spreadsheets. Back in the day, some of us are old enough to remember the world before a spreadsheet. And when that technology first came out, people were scared of it. There were people that were clicking in their adding machines, and that was their whole job, was to add up and to verify and to do that. And with the spreadsheet, those jobs went away. But new jobs came on, right? People learned spreadsheet technology and were able to, instead of spending time adding up numbers, they were actually spending time being able to analyze those numbers and become more efficient or experienced with what they were doing, instead of these mundane routine tasks that no human really wants to do. But, if that's your job and that's all you have to do, well, you're going to do it, right? So yeah. I think there will be some jobs that will be eliminated. There will be new jobs that will be formed, because technology needs technologists to run the technology. How many times have people been frustrated when their computer doesn't work, right? There's always going to be human intervention in terms of helping your technology perform what it's supposed to do. And also, taking us out of some of these mundane tasks might allow for new ways to analyze data and new information to come about. There was one system that I read about that was basically analyzing like the financial statements, the appraisals for the property. It was analyzing all of the documents and the information that it had to help make better decisions. So if you're not having to pull all the appraisals for a particular commercial real estate property, and you're relying on the technology to kind of collate that and give you sort of the overall synopsis of the different appraisals and why there may have been differences between the values that were given, then you're making higher level decisions. You're not actually pulling those appraisals. So I think it's going to be both, and it's going to obviously be an evolution. It's not going to be, we're not going to flip a switch and AI is going to take over the world. And it took a long time for people to even understand, let's say, formulas and spreadsheets. And some people still don't understand them, right? I think it'll be a little bit of both.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it reminds me of what it must have been like when cars were being invented, and getting away from the horse and the buggy. The people that sold, or that made the buggy and the buggy whips for the horse, were concerned. But then Ford came around, and come to find out, those people can make cars. So I think you're right. I think it's just going to be a natural evolution of thing. How do you think the implementation of AI will change, or will it change the landscape of competition amongst mortgage loan providers? In other words, if let's say if my company is using it and whatever Susan's company is not, how am I going to have the advantage? And how does that in competition? Is there an argument or not that I need to be embracing this?
I think yes. Because what makes a competitor? They're faster to be able to either make decisions, or faster to market. They don't need as many resources, right? So their costs are lower. So if you can enable AI technology to be faster and to have to use less resources, yes, you're going to be more competitive in that regard. And there's small examples of how this is being used, even just for support desks, like help chats, right, to help people get information that they need to eliminate that first level call center when they're trying to get some information on that. And specifically for lenders, let's face it, lenders are typically a little slow to adopt, a little slow to change, a little slow to move. I think this technology might really force those lenders to take another look at it. If we look at some of the lending institutions that have embraced technology, both on the commercial and the real estate side, I would say they're more competitive. They're doing more loans because they can do them faster, right? They can analyze those loans, they can make decisions on those loans, they can underwrite those loans because they have that data that they need to be able to do that. So absolutely, I think that it would, if I were a lender and I were in a senior level position, I would be looking very seriously at how AI could transform my processes and my workflows.
Yeah, because I can see, after reading your article and doing a little research of my own, I can see where the AI effect on the timeline of, say, processing a mortgage loan drastically decreased. And perhaps closing in a day or two or three, or obviously we'd have to make some changes in some of our legal requirements of having to give so many days based upon an archaic system. I can see how this could really, particularly, I don't know, I don't see it on the selling as much. Actually, that's a good. So I see massive ways that this could help on the processing part and perhaps the underwriting part. A lot of our listeners are originators, so these are the salespeople of the industry. Do you see applications for them also, either good things or things they need to watch out for?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like valuation of properties. I mean, let's face it, commercial real estate transactions are very complex, right? They can involve multiple parties, they can have multiple buildings, they can have mixed use properties. So there's a lot of information that those originators have to look at, right? They have to be able to analyze, is this going to be a good loan or a bad loan, right? Ultimately.
Yeah.
And they have to do some forecasting. So in the origination side, for sure. I mean, some of that can be aided by AI doing some of those, as I said, those routine mundane tasks of going through those financial statements, going through those lease agreements, seeing how long they are, right? Seeing what some of the, opt-out clauses are, and being able to provide some more information to make a better loan decision on that piece of property. So I think, yeah, from both sides of it, from the origination until it gets to closing, and then the post-closing side when the investors are in, that have to look at all this documentation and say, well, what do I actually have here? Right. And, there's lots of different references that reference different documents, and all of that is time consuming, right? It's very requires, lawyers really to construct that deal. So if there can be some analysis at a higher level, both, leading up to closing, verifying that everything's correct, and then after closing, I think, it'll be impactful.
Hmm. I want to take a look at the dark side here, just for a brief second, and what I mean by that is, like you mentioned in the article, you mentioned concerns about privacy and misuse of data with AI implementation. Can you expand about like what those risks might look like in this, what we're talking about here?
Well, sure. I mean, any technology is vulnerable to a cyber attack, right? And what if some kind of bot got in there and started making some kind of change to the code or did something? I mean, we know there's malware out there. That's just inherent in any technology application. So that's the first thing, is that these systems have to be robust enough and armor proof against some of these things that could possibly happen. And a lot of AI right now is built on open source technology. So there have to be some guardrails in there so that what was open source and that anybody can have access to is closed off enough so that those cyber attacks can be prevented. So that's like the first thing. And then the second thing is that AI is trained on data. And one of the I guess cons of it is that if that data is skewed or biased in any way, the decision will be skewed or biased. So you have to make sure that what you're inputting into AI doesn't have inherent biases or discriminatory practices built into it. And that, as we know in the lending industry, is a large deal. So, certain information might need to be not put into AI so that it's not biased on certain pieces of information around that. So, and that's, and also, I mean, I'm sure you've read about AI. Who hasn't read about AI these days, right? That it's going to take over the world and humans are going to become obsolete and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I think the appropriate guardrails can be put into place. And I guess the other, challenge is the AI is only going to be as good as what's put into it, what it's trained on, right? It's a learning system, right? It's fed information and it deals with that information. So where are we going to get all this information? One lender might have all of its information that it can feed into it, but a really good AI system would have multiple sources of information coming to it that would maybe help prevent some of that biasing that maybe a particular lender even has. So,
Yeah. I was talking with somebody, told somebody I was interviewing you today, and my buddy made a statement. I kind of chuckled at first, and as I started thinking about it, I thought, well, maybe it's not a chuckle. He said, Carl, I can see it at a time where the consumer has their AI bot, and their AI bot is looking into my AI bot of selling them something, and that theirs is looking for the perfect buy and mine's looking for the perfect, customer, and that the bots are doing nothing but just talking to each other. And I could see something like that. It's like somebody was asking me the other day, and I'll ask you, this is a huge, broad question, but they said, well, what's it look like in 5 or 10 years from now? Is there any way we can even begin to think, what does this look like 5 years, 10 years from now?
I'm not sure. I wish I could say yes. I feel definitely we will know, right? And I think probably social media is a good indicator, right? That was put out there, people jumped on board, everybody was, using Facebook and Twitter and not thinking about the consequences of it necessarily. And there have been a lot of warnings about AI that people are just jumping on board and not really considering, some of the consequences that might happen. So as we start to see more new startup companies or more new applications of AI, I think it will start to become clearer. I think it's just so new now that it's being touted. I mean, blockchain a couple of years ago, everything was blockchain, right? Blockchain was going to be the new database. Blockchain was going to be used everywhere, and so far that has not turned out to be true. Yeah. I think there will be very specific applications of AI that will be very good. And those specific applications will be very successful. I think other than that, I can't see it majorly transforming anything in the next 5 to 7 years, but I could be wrong. Yeah. But that's just based on my experience. I mean, we've been trying to digitize the mortgage in my entire career in mortgage for the last 20 years. And, we're still at 6% of all mortgages on the residential side are electronic. So we haven't made a whole lot of progress in 20 some years. So, but we'll see.
Yeah. What do you think? So let's take Jane or John Doe loan officer on the street. What should mortgage loan officers be doing now to prepare for the integration of AI into the workflows? Like somebody that's listening to this today, hey, Rachel, what should I do next? Where do I go from here?
Well, I think, I think for AI, I think if it really comes down to if you're experienced in a job, what the tasks are, right? And if there's something that you're like, oh, I can't even believe I have to do this, every single loan. I wish I had X, right? And I think that's the power of AI, is that you can have X, and Jane or John Doe can actually go in to, and build code, and they can do things. And I think that is going to be a real game changer, that people, if people embrace AI, and if they're willing to try it, and if they're willing to think about ways in which that they can improve what they do, that will move it forward. I think it's just about, reevaluating the process. And that's what I do in my consulting business is, okay, let's see what you do today. And let's see what some of the roadblocks are. And let's see where you might be able to insert technology to help you. And, let's see what technology you have that's working. Let's see what's not working. And how can we make this all flow better? So I think that's, if I were a loan officer, I'd be like, this is the one thing I can't stand. For instance, it takes too long to get an appraisal, or it takes too long for me to analyze the appraisals that I've gotten, or, these are the issues that I have, and to talk with the folks in your lending community and see what could be put together. It really in my experience too, it really has to come from the top. So any technological initiative at any lending institution has to have the buy-in from the C-suite. I mean, without that, it's not going to be successful. Yeah. And if you have leadership that was willing to embrace AI, then I think that will move it forward. But you need, even if you're a loan originator, in a lending, just raise your concerns, or raise what you think you see how this might help you in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, I think, right now, I think what's happening, it's kind of like if a Neanderthal person, man or woman, if somehow we shipped them an iPhone and they got this thing and they see, wow, this got some really cool pictures. They have no idea the power of that machine. And I think that's kind of what we're dealing with now, where, some of us are in there playing with the Chat GPT. Was probably the most popular platform so far on how it can write an article and things like that. And we go, hey, that's all fine and dandy. That's the pictures on the cell phone, right? That we're not, I don't think we begin to know how to tap into this massive resource. And I guess we'll figure that out, I guess, as time goes on. Do you think so like in my business, I'm a branch manager on the residential side of one of the largest branches in the nation. And I know for me, it's that interaction with the borrower, the client, and with in my case at least, with the real estate agents. Really, it's really that interaction with them is where the magic is, right? That's where we get our referrals from. How do you think the adoption of AI, and let's say specifically in the commercial mortgages, how is that going to influence our relationship with the borrowers and the professionals in there? Now that we're removing a little bit of self, perhaps, out of the equation, do you see that affecting us in a positive or negative way?
I mean, I think it has the potential to be negative if, as you said, if chatbots are talking to one another, there's no human in there, and that will be lost, that personal relationship. But, we as humans seek out connection. So maybe I'm altruistic, but, I would think that would continue, because we wouldn't want to give away like the interaction we're having here today. I mean, we're talking to one another. There's no AI here telling us what to do, or I am a real person, that type of thing. So I don't know. It could negatively influence some of the interpersonal relationships, because it might reduce the number of interactions that you have to have. It might not. The interactions you have might not be, hey, you didn't sign this document, or hey, I need this from you, or hey, instead of, the ping, 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 it's like, okay, I've got all these documents. Let me tell you what I see so far. I think we're in a good place, or we're not in a good place because of this thing, so, who knows, right?
Yeah.
As I said in the article, I don't know if this is the wizard behind the curtain, or, we're ever going to get to the Emerald City.
Yeah. And if you haven't, again, for our listeners, if you haven't read this, make sure you go check the July edition, Promise of AI. Rachael, give us, I see we're at close to the top of the hour here. Give me an action item. So I read your article. I'm listening to you here on this podcast. Give our listeners an action item. What should they do? Like, as soon as they leave here, one thing that they ought to do is what?
Well, if they haven't read my article, read my article. That's number one. Other than that, I would say, get interested in AI. It's easy to play with it, and think about how it might be able to impact your professional life and your personal life. It's kind of an interesting technology, and I think the more people know about it, the more informed the people are, the better ideas we'll have around it, instead of reading some of what we read in the press about what it's going to do or what it isn't going to do. And it's not just something that technologists need to play with. I mean, ChatGPT, you can it's pretty straightforward and easy because it's conversational. So I would say play around with it, see what you think. These are just my thoughts, but I think it definitely has the potential to, as I said, impact the commercial real estate industry. And I think because there's so many documents and so much is on paper, that I think AI will really be able to transform how we get information out of that paper. And we might not get to a completely digital process, but we've got paper for right now. And I think that's where AI's biggest benefit will be.
Very good. Anything I should have asked you today, Rachael? I know we could talk about this. I think it's fascinating to me. It really is. And I'm sure I could talk for the next hour for easy. Is there anything that I should have asked you here in the short time that we had? Anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of ground. Absolutely. I mean, we could keep this conversation going for probably hours, and it's a fascinating topic to me. So I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about it, and to written an article for Scotsman. So.
All right, great. And Rachael, if somebody needed to reach out to you for professional services, what's the best way for them to do that? And what's the? I know you kind of talked about it at the beginning, but what's the? Somebody would reach out to you. They need help with.
Yeah, if they want help with the digitization process for their lending institution, if they're interested in how they might be able to use AI, best way to reach me is Magnolia Technologies is my company. MagnoliaTech.com is my website. You can reach me there with my email. My last name is Sokolowski, so it's a little hard for my email, but my email is on that site. It's also listed in the article on Scotsman's Guide. So
very good. All right, Rachael, thanks so much. Appreciate you coming on here. Just a great, insightful time for myself and my own personal business. So a lot of good things to ponder here, and it certainly is warrants more investigation into how to utilize this tool. very, very powerful thing. And I'm sure we're going to be, this is not a fad that's just coming and going. This is going to be, I think, more revolutionary than the internet was to our lives. I think this is like the wheel or fire or electricity. I think this falls in one of those very rare categories. So thanks so much, Rachael, for being here. And for our listeners, on behalf of myself, Carl White, and the whole team over at the Scotsman Guide, we really appreciate you guys listening to us. Appreciate you subscribing to the magazine. And we appreciate you forwarding this to 3 of your favorite loan officer friends. They'll thank you for it. We'll thank you for it. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Authors Showcase, presented to you by the Scotsman Guide. So thanks very much. And we'll talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.